listening to yet another episode of Smash the Bug. I'm your host, Joseph Maxwell, and I am very pleased to bring to you another guest, a very intelligent person who has fought through, I would say, more than their fair share of bugs, and has come out the victor on the other side with these more than fair share of bugs. I hope you take inspiration and hopefully even more than that, learning from this conversation as we seek to grow our own skill sets, as I seek to grow my skill set in the ability to quickly and effectively solve problems. Before we do, though, I'd love to request that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Swift Otter Inc., or subscribe to the podcast on whatever your favorite podcast syndication platform is. You will find us there, Smash the Bug Podcast. So, without further ado, I would love to introduce Michal Biarda from Poland. He is the CTO at Orba and is very Magento certified. So, welcome, Michal. It's good to have you here.
Hi, Joseph. It's a pleasure to be here.
Why don't you give us a quick overview as far as what the CTO does? Like, what is your day-to-day responsibilities? What do you do on an average day?
Okay, so the short answer is too much.
Okay.
The longer answer is, a lot of things. Some of them is still developing. So working on some important projects here in Orba. Some of them is, again, working on a project, but in the role of a solution architect, solution specialist. So more from the business perspective or from architectural perspective. But other than that, a lot of things related to the whole company's strategy. So most recently, it was introducing coding standards in Orba. Things like, teaching people how to code solid, teaching people some other stuff as well. What's more, making and managing our internal projects. I hope we will talk about one of them in just a few minutes. So a lot of stuff. Also, when there are some really, really large issues on some projects, like performance issues or some very, very weird bugs, I'm the one who can help. So as you can see, a lot of stuff.
That's good. You got to have somebody like that around to be able to facilitate those type of the backstop, if you will, for a development team. I mean, that's you have to have a developer like that. So the question that I like to dig into is, what are some recent challenges that you fought through, that you have dealt with, that you would like to share with our audience? Now, things that you have worked through and maybe even felt beaten back by, but that you ultimately were the victor in the long run. Maybe we can talk through a couple of these challenges.
Sure. So the first, and it's like an ongoing problem from many, many years, but we are fighting it more and more, is unmaintainable spaghetti code. So the problem is that a lot of developers, even those who are talking about themselves as senior developers, are basically doing spaghetti code. I believe that most of your audience know what the spaghetti code is, but for those who don't, this is basically very, very long methods with large complexity, everything in one place. A lot of ifs in ifs in ifs, a lot of for eaches in for eaches. So basically everything mixed as in spaghetti.
That's right.
And of course, it is not commonly seen that big spaghetti, but still the code quality of the, let's say, average developer is closer to spaghetti than to a very clean code. That's at least my experience for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, my code like 5 years ago was the same spaghetti. So
we've all been there and done that. I absolutely, I have done that. And to be frank, the code reviews. So I obviously, and internally here, I subject myself to code reviews, and there are times that I'm called out for spaghetti code too. So it's a constant, at least for me. Maybe you've hopefully gotten past that point, but for me, it's still even a constant fight to ensure that the quality of the code that I put out is excellent. So absolutely, this is a good challenge, and let's dig into this. How have you been able to overcome this?
Yeah. So you mentioned code review. So we started doing really intense code reviews, having in mind solid principles. So the important thing is that my idea is not to fight with spaghetti, rather than to teach people basically how to write the solid code at first place. And why spaghetti code is so wrong? Because it's so easy to make a bug. When everything is so mixed up, it is it is very hard to spot these small guys, small bugs. And I in the previous year, I was working with few guys, and both of them were from India, which I see that in India, spaghetti code is a big problem. I will explain why just in a second. But I work with these guys, and I was trying to teach them, but not the definitions. But basically, I was showing them how you could do some things in a better way, in a more solid way. But what's more important, not only how, but also why they should do it. So I am trying to explain them, for example, all right, if here instead of doing some kind of internal for each, you inject an array, and in this array you will be adding some, validators, for example. Then in the future, if you just need to add one validator, you're just configuring it in your DI, and you are just editing code in one place. So this is my approach. And I mentioned India. One of the guys that I pretty much like, and he joined Orba like half a year ago. It's Amit. Hi, Amit. I know you are listening to us. He told me that in India, because the competition is so hardcore, there are a lot of developers. The problem is that they are just taught to get things done as fast as possible. So they are not learned to code in a good quality in mind. They are not taught to code having in mind maintainability. It just needs to be done as soon as possible. So that's the issue. In Orba, we think that quality is also important, and actually, I think even more important than the time. Of course, there are budgets, etc. But when you have code smells, and when you have large projects that last for many years, and we have a lot of such projects, then sooner or later, these small savings that you got from just making spaghetti code that works somehow, they're just too small, and it will just go worse and worse.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And the part of the issue is, it's one thing to take a project live. It's another thing to maintain it in the long term. And spaghetti code, in my experience, it can work okay for, let's call it version 1. By the time version 2, version 3 rolls around, that's when spaghetti code starts breaking down, because you've added to it, and maybe it was okay at first, not great, but maybe it was okay, passable, let's just say at first. But then as you start modifying it and fixing bugs in what was in version 1, and that's when it just starts completely falling apart. So without being, like you were saying, properly architected, absolutely, I totally agree. And I appreciate what you said about like the context in India, and I see that so often. And I wanted to also say this as well, and that it's the pressure on the developers. I see developers being pushed to work, I don't know, 14, 16-hour days in some cases. They are not being trained. It's about pushing them to the absolute limit. When in reality, the question is who's doing this, and it's the companies that are there trying to, and they're not being paid very well too. One of the people that actually works for Swiftwater, it could not make me more proud. Literally just purchased a house in India, and it's a beautiful house, and he's just a rock star on the team, and I think a lot of this comes back to is the companies in India willing to invest in their developers? I guess this is my plea as well. It's just like companies, as you are listening out there, and sorry for this rant, Michal, I know we're talking about other stuff, but like you got me going on something here. It's like companies, as you are listening to this, invest in your people. Honestly, no matter where they are in the world, invest in them. Put the resources that you need in order to make them excellent and truly effective. Everybody wins in that case. Sorry. So end rant. That's but I appreciate you calling that out. Absolutely. That's so. Let's just take a minute here. What would you say are some of your favorite or go-to areas of a code review?
Okay, so definitely checking things from first letter of solid, so single responsibility. I love when all the classes has single responsibility, and even I encourage people to create these so-called action classes. And I think I borrowed it from you from one of your courses. So if, for example, your code needs to get a product by source code and something, let's just create a class that is called get a product by this and that. Create one method for it with typed properties, and let this method just do this. And the cool thing about that is, first of all, it just does one thing. It is really easy to test. It is really easy to use. But the second thing is that it is reusable. So you can use this small part of code in your whole project. And what's more, if it is done in a good way, you can even reuse it in other projects. So you are doing one thing in a good way, and then you are benefiting from it multiple times. So this is it. The O from.
If I could jump in one there.
Yeah, sure.
On that, I that is a massive deal. And again, just to put a big underscore on what you just said, because as an example, we finished an audit here recently of a fairly large code base. I didn't care for necessarily how the developers handled the module naming. Like there was way too many modules, but I found over 300 duplicate code references in that code base, in their custom code area of that. Over 300. Might have been 380, actually close to 400. That's a real problem. For you go fix a bug in one place, it pops up in another. You play whack-a-mole. And so that single responsibility principle, I could not agree more. And that is absolutely critical to a well-functioning code base, is that one place does one thing very well. And again, like you also mentioned, again, big underscore there, small. Not these big, massive classes, small. So excellent. Keep on.
Yeah, so you reminded me one thing from very, very long time ago when I was still working with Magento 1. And this was one of our first projects for a very large company. And the project itself was pretty straightforward and easy, I would say. We got some Chinese Magento, and we were asked to translate it, switch it to Turkish Magento. Okay. So it was some translation things, some modules installation, and that's it. So really not much. But the thing is, they had like 5 or 10 different types of product, let's say. And for each type of this product, there was product list PHTML, just copy pasted, and only some minor things were switched there. So this was
good example.
This was so painful, and it was it was disaster at first to basically see what are the differences. But we, of course, we handled it, and we make just one list PHTML. But that's a good memory. And by the way, this Chinese Magento had Chinese letters inside JavaScript files. That's my cool memory. Yeah.
That would be, I guess. Well, let me just say this: did Google Translate take care of that for you, or that?
No. I was just removing it.
Oh, okay. For translations, I got you. Okay, yeah. I was thinking if variables were named that could be tricky for us.
No. I'm not sure if it will compile.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Very good. So that was single responsibility principle. Let's move on to O. What's O?
Yeah. So for O, these are these injecting validators. So here I'm a very large fan of making my code open for extension, but close. Forgotten the word. So I like to do my code that is really easy extendable, but you don't need to touch it to change anything. You are just configuring something, injecting something, etc. And I am asking my developers to do so because it's really a time saver. For example, if you have your unit tests created, so if you do just a for each with all the validators and you need to add another one, your unit test will just break. If you have each validator in a separate method, separate class, you are just doing unit test for each of them. And for the whole method to which the validator array is injected, you are just checking the array. So this is one thing. But also it is just, for me personally, it is just fun to code this way because everything is easy to find.
Yeah. And again, on that one, there's been I had a question recently on LinkedIn. Somebody saying basically, how do you saying that they didn't really think plugins were the best idea in Magento, and I see the challenges associated with plugins. However, with O being the acronym that's an acronym for open closed principles, basically open for extension but closed for modification. I feel like, and it could be just me, so I feel like plugins are kind of a mechanism to enable that, because the other option is to override a method. In that audit, there was at least 80 preferences where the software developer had copied code from Magento. Like, obviously, they have if you need to modify what's going on a private method, like there's a whole bunch of code that was copied over, and of course the changes were not annotated, so you have to go back through and figure out what was changed, etc. But it's using the plugins judiciously but also effectively can also help in that way. And the other thing is the plugins themselves can be tested as well, so you can test what's happening in like a before plugin and after plugin. And again, I know that can get down to a bit of a controversial rabbit hole. But maybe I'm old school. I still feel like plugins are are useful for modifying core functionality, as opposed to, I'm not really sure of almost any other way other than just using preferences. And that's like taking a sledgehammer to the situation.
Yeah, so personally, I'm a big fan of plugins, and of course, if you write them not carefully, like for example, a lot of around plugins instead of just before and after, this can lead to performance issues and to very long stack traces. So it has some downsides, but in my opinion, it's more pros than cons. So one thing worth mentioning: when you are building your classes with just one public method and with small method, then ultimately all of your code is pluginable, which is a very large benefit. Absolutely. Especially for vendors who are creating modules, for the marketplace. I've seen so many, and probably you too, so many modules that are basically unextendable with spaghetti code, tons of private methods, and so on. This is a nightmare.
Yes, well, and it kind of goes back to the whole thing of, well, Magento said use a private method, and so developers use private methods, but not realizing the implication that it has. Private methods are good and correct when used properly. The problem is that in a lot of cases they aren't used properly, and that kind of starts creating problems. Well, it kind of again comes back to the first one, the single responsibility principle. And again, focusing on being just dogged about the single responsibility principle. I think that there's a reason they put it first in that list. Just to be really frank, like if you don't follow the single responsibility principle, I think that starts with spaghetti code right there, right? So
yeah, that's right. And Joseph, I will mention one more thing, because
yes,
I had exactly the same. So first I started doing these private methods that were encapsulating some smaller logic, but then I thought, all right, let's switch them to public methods in separate classes. And the biggest problem I had was inventing a name for that class. So that was the bigger problem. So I had a lot of classes like product, task, processor, or this kind of task that this kind of names that basically tells you nothing if you didn't make this code. So then you came with this idea of action classes to basically put that the methods does. So, for example, I create inventory source for stock, and this tells you everything. So, yeah, naming stuff is always hard.
Yes. Well, and actually, I will say that kind of the other end of these action classes, as we talked about, the flip side, right? There's always an upside and a downside. The downside with the action classes is that as you get into larger projects, you can get so many action classes that then it also becomes hard to know that you've already written something along these lines. And so we've actually started even grouping or categorizing in some of our larger projects, grouping or categorizing some of these action classes just to kind of give a better visual glance as far as what's been done and what hasn't been done. So that's about the only downside that I'm aware of when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it seems we have similar ideas, because we recently also started doing this. Basically, we are putting them in multiple modules. So the ones that are related to catalog are in our catalog module. The one related to inventory in inventory, and so on. It works quite well in our recent projects.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so do you want to? I guess we have just a few minutes left. Let's run through the last three letters of this, and then we're gonna have to come back and chat some more later, because I like to keep these to half an hour, and we've we're talking about the first concept here, and we've blown out a half an hour, which is great. I love it. I mean, we've had a lot of good. This has been a good conversation. So I've only gone on one or two rants, so that's a good thing as well. So yeah, let's. You want to finish out? We'll finish talking about the last three letters, and then we'll come back at another time and finish up the rest of what we want to talk about, or maybe two more times. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. Well, honestly, I believe that two first letters are the most important.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the last three are also important. But if you have the first two letters in your skill set, then you ultimately are much better developer. So if you want, we can just skip. I don't have much to talk about the last three.
All right. Yeah. So for those of you that are listening, if you don't know the last three, just go out and review those. And I do very much agree with Michal that the first two are the absolute most important. So good point there. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. So having a good, strong code review on the website is absolutely important and absolutely critical. So let's talk about another challenge. What's another one that you have?
All right. So another challenge is about time wasting on repeatable task. So if you work with Magento and you have to create 10th admin grid in your project, I believe you are just very, very sad because you have to copy paste tons of the files. You have to carefully check what to edit in those files. Usually you forget something. Then you have to go to the admin panel, refresh the page, see that some sorting is not working and you don't know why, and so on and so on. So there are thousands of these little things in Magento that I used to call a boilerplate code that you just need to do, and you don't like it because you are repeating it all the times, and you cannot focus on the actual problems like business problems, business logic, because you need to struggle with this boilerplate code. And here, I'm a big fan of using code generation tools. And actually, Orba is the owner of one of these tools. It was published like a year ago, I think, already. Even,
yes.
Even maybe earlier. It's called Codagen. So you can find it on GitHub, and hopefully Joseph will copy paste you the link to.
We'll definitely put that in the show notes. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So if I can just explain in a few words how it works.
Please.
So the idea here is that this is a composer library that you can just install as a dev dependency in your project, and then ultimately you can run it to generate a set of code snippets. And we already have like 20 something or even 30 templates from which the code is generated. And some of them are very small, like, for example, a mixin for JavaScript method, for JavaScript file. But some of them are very, very big. Like, for example, new entity with the whole model, API, repository, grid in admin panel with multi-actions, with basically everything. So small and big ones. And how it works, you basically type a comment in your command tool, choose the template, and then you are prompted with multiple questions. So, for example, in this small template, you are asked, okay, for what file you would like to create a mixin, and then how the method that you would like to override is called, and what is the type of the file. So is it a UI component, or is it maybe just a standard JavaScript object, or maybe jQuery widget? So you're asking these questions, clicking OK, and then it generates the code in your code base in a place where you defined that it should be generated. And the very, very cool thing about our tool, because of course there are some different tools, but this is only our tool does this thing, is that it generates the code directly into your existing code base. So it is not just creating some files, but it is able to merge these files with your code base. So if imagine you have your module and you would like to add this new entity with admin reads in it. So it updates your DI.XML, it updates system XML. It just merges it with whatever content you have, and it thank you. I think so. And it not only is able to merge XML files, but also require JS configs, and also even in some ways PHP classes.
I was just looking at this. Yeah. So you talked about the JavaScript Mixin, and I see, obviously I haven't tested it out here, but like I see how it is designed to mix in, well, pun intended actually, with an existing JavaScript file. And I think that's brilliant. I had no idea that it did that, because again, everything that I'm aware of works to solve like for new files, I guess. But this is phenomenal, being able to merge all that in here. So that is very impressive.
That was our biggest goal when we were creating the tool, because all the other tools were just creating new files, and we wanted it to be usable in ongoing project and not only at the very beginning of your project. And it works pretty cool.
That's awesome. Very well. Yeah, that's awesome. That'll definitely be included in the show notes, and I'll actually try it out on one of our projects, because that can really save that could save a lot of time. And I think the one thing I will say to those people, that are getting started out, is the one challenge that I always have with automatic generation tools is that it's easy to just accept the output and say that's what it should be, and not necessarily understand what it's doing. So for anybody that's using a tool like this, my suggestion is always to understand what was created, understand why it was created, and then to know what it's doing in the system, as opposed to just, I can create like a new Mixin and I just drop my code in there, I'm done. It's a matter of using this tool to accelerate the process, not circumvent the learning experience. And so that's always the caveat I put on this, but I'm really excited about this. Yeah, I'm gonna get in there, I'm gonna use it, and yeah, I'm really excited about it. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and by the way, if you just go through the code of the tool, through the source,
yes,
you can notice multiple solid things in it.
That's awesome.
Everything that we discussed earlier, it has here. Well, it doesn't have these action classes, because we started using action classes later, but it has a lot of things just configured by dependency injection.
Very good. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Thank you for sharing, and I'm really excited about it. Thank you. So with that, I hate to say this, but I think we should wrap up. I know there was more we had on our show notes to talk about, but I think we should wrap it up. I very much appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom, your insight, what you have learned, and you've been through a lot, and this is really cool to see this tool, the CodeGen tool, as well as what you've learned about solid coding principles. So thank you for coming on, Michal.
Yeah, I thank you for the opportunity to be here, because I'm a big fan of your podcast, so it's nice to be in it.
Well, that is wonderful. I definitely appreciate you taking the time. Well, that was an absolute pleasure hanging out with Michal here today. I hope that you took a tremendous challenge. Basically, everything that we're doing is encouraging people in solid coding principles, and this was a really important conversation to have with this. Very practical. I hope that if you have questions, make sure to jump into our swiftotter.com/Slack channel. So it's our Slack. That's how you get there. Channel, and Michal is in there. Some really brilliant people is in that Slack community. Ask these questions if you're having a challenge. Like, okay, I got this spaghetti code. So how do I escape out of this situation? There's some brilliant people there who will help you. I'll do my best to help you as well. So be interactive, be part of the community, and by being part of the community, you will become a better developer, and that's what our desire is. So if you found this helpful, please drop a comment on YouTube. How can we improve? How can we make this even better? What questions did you have about solid coding principles? Drop that in Slack, put it on YouTube, linked wherever you see this, we'll respond there. And most importantly, have an absolutely wonderful day and look forward to our next podcast.